newspaper man, investigative reporter, and really an intelligent, productive guy in educating America and all who will listen. Ed Kociela.
Good morning, Rebecca.
Good morning, Ed. It's great to have you.
It's great to be here with you.
I read recently about a family in the FLDS that had gone to court, and basically the woman who got out of the FLDS lost the right to protect her children from the FLDS. I want you to comment on what happened there.
Okay, well, what happened is actually the woman, Charlene Jeffs, is the legal wife of Lyle Jeffs, who has been placed in charge of the FLDS community since Warren has been in prison, since his brother Warren has been in prison in Texas. Charlene filed for divorce, which she, as the legal wife, could do. And so in the process of the court's situation, she filed for custody of two of her children, a boy who is 17 and a girl who is 14, I believe. And she filed in court to gain custody of the children. It was fought by Lyle, and just over the past couple of days, as a matter of fact, what happened was there was a settlement that did come forward where Lyle granted her custody of the two children. He will get to see them on weekends and for a bit during the summer, but she will have custody of the kids. Now, one of the things that's really tough about all of this is that, you know, as women leave the community, they end up not having a whole lot of money. And you know as well as I do that to enter a courtroom with an attorney, it costs a lot of money. You have attorney fees that are very, very steep, and very few attorneys will take a case like that pro bono. So it makes it extremely difficult for one of the parents to try and gain custody of their children. There's also a very unique situation in Utah law where if one of the parents in a custody battle or in a divorce is not well off, if they don't have much money, the other parent, the other partner, can end up having to pay for both sets of attorney fees. We had an instance not long ago where a gentleman who had left the community was filing and trying to gain custody of his children. Well, what happens in these situations is that some of the poorer, some of the less wealthy families that split up, the one who doesn't have money ends up petitioning the court for the partner to pick up part of the expenses in the custody suit. That happened to a gentleman down in the community who had left. His wife remained in the FLDS community and wanted to maintain control or custody of the children. During the course of the lawsuit, the woman had petitioned because she claimed she was insolvent and petitioned the judge for her ex-husband to have to pay for her court expenses and attorney fees.
That's pretty good because we generally we have a rule that he who has the money wins. So I'm glad that there's a little better balance there.
Well, it really kind of depends, because one of the problems, Rebecca, is when these parents leave the community, they have no money. They're trying to reestablish themselves. They're trying to get on their feet. You know, we have women who leave the community with barely anything but clothes on their back. We have men who get tossed out of the community with nothing. So yeah, there is some advantage in some situations, but in what happens with some of the FLDS folks who have left the community and try to regain custody of their children, they end up on the short side simply because they're poor. They don't have jobs. It takes them a long time to find a job that pays decently, and especially in southern Utah wages. You know, it's a tough situation. So what's happened with Charlene Jeffs is she has found a way to settle with her ex-husband. Now, there are also some allegations that she made in court documents that are going to be very interesting. Um, Charlene Charlene will be appearing on 2020 sometime soon to discuss what her life was like within the community. In her paperwork with the court, in filing for custody of her children, she claimed illegal activities that include rape going on in the FLDS community, and that's one of the reasons she wanted to take her children away from there.
Well, in reading the paper, it was obvious with the visitation rights and whatnot that she actually literally cannot completely protect her daughter because she can't prevent them from going someplace else with her daughter, which is really common.
Well, there was the fear, as she had told the judge, there was the fear that the children could end up in Colorado, in the new compound in South Dakota, perhaps in Canada, perhaps in rural Colorado, perhaps even in Mexico. There are a couple of sites, one in Ensenada and one on mainland Mexico, where the FLDS have compounds. By the way, that South Dakota compound of the FLDS is apparently growing very, very large. They're not sure how many people, even the South Dakota law enforcement officials aren't sure how many people are actually living there at this time. But there are problems already because one of the things that they have applied for at the compound in Pringle, outside of Pringle, South Dakota, is more water rights, because the number of people apparently that have settled in this new compound is far greater than what they had originally told the city fathers. They have tall walls completely surrounding the compound. There is a guard tower at one corner of the compound. And the South Dakota officials are starting to get a little bit concerned about exactly what's going on out there. So we have a lot of stuff that's going on even now. You know, we wonder what's happening with them. Well, they're so secretive, we don't really know. All we know is that they're in these various compounds, particularly this new one in South Dakota that they got for a song, and they have built up basically a fortress there with guard towers, and they're stacking people inside of it.
So many cases in the past, particularly a notorious one was the Kingston case, where the children were given back to the father because he had the money and the woman didn't have a job. That has been the history of the past pretty prevalently. So this change of getting the husband to pay part of the bills is actually a benevolent one. How long do you think it'll hold? Do you think it will stay that way?
I think, well, things are slow to change in the state of Utah, so I think it will probably hold. And again, like I said, that's a two-edged sword. You know, it can be a very difficult thing, because if it's somebody who is remaining within the community who ends up paying the bill, you know who's going to pay that. It's going to come through the church funds. However, if it's somebody who has escaped the community and is trying to create a life for themselves, and it's the woman who remains within the FLDS community, she can claim no income, she can claim all kinds of abandonment issues, and she can try to stick the guy who has left with her bill. So it's a double-edged sword. It cuts both ways. You know, it's good in some respects, it's tough in others.
Well, it's amazing those that are loyal to the church have the church's financial backing. So the one that leaves is male or female. They're out cold unless something wonderful happens or is benevolent through the court.
Exactly. You know, and it doesn't even have to happen. Custody issues don't even have to happen through the court. We had the situation that I believe we discussed at one point, of the father who had been tossed out of the community and tried to gain custody of his daughter, and it took 6 years before they could actually locate her, and they're not sure exactly where all she had been hidden. What had happened was they actually had the help of the FBI at one point to intervene, and they found the girl, reunited her with her father and her new stepmother because he had remarried. And basically what the FBI told him was, get the heck out of Dodge. They said, we can do all the legal work that we want, and we can try and protect much as we want, but this is a pretty deep web that the FLDS community has. So what happened was the family, the father, his new wife, and his daughter had taken off to California for a while to kind of reconnect and to get away from the environment. On the way back to southern Utah, they had stopped in the little town of Mesquite, Nevada, which is just about half hour southwest of St. George, and were in a strip mall. The wife went in to make a purchase at the convenience store. The father was in his vehicle with his daughter when a truck from Short Creek came in. The girl went up to tell her, leave her alone. Well, when that happened, they swept her up and took off, and they couldn't find her. She's been missing since. So they'll try to win in the court, or they'll just snatch them away off the street.
Well, I've seen so many snatchaways in my own lifetime that I saw a lot more of that than I saw winning. So when I see even one case that has some real justice in it, it gives me a little hope that maybe somewhere, somehow, we can educate humanity enough that somebody will start listening. This is slavery in the name of God.
Well, absolutely, Rebecca, it is. And, you know, you have the problem, you have very young, impressionable children who are being used as the pawns in these skirmishes, these custody battles. And the kids, you know, they're young. They have been raised since birth that this is the way, this is the path to their salvation. This is what's going to lead them up to celestial kingdom and everlasting, you know, joy and peace and whatever. And so they don't understand what's going on. They know no different. They have no clue. They have no idea about the outside world. They have no concept of what's going on around them. All they know is that mommy or daddy has been thrown out of the community for whatever strange reasons they're told, you know, and it's the kids that are getting impacted by this. You know, they're the ones that are dealing with the separation of their parents. And they're the ones who are dealing with being torn between what they were raised to believe and the community they were raised within, and being exposed to a real world that's more inviting. So that's where that, you know, the adult battles and all that, whether it's the FLDS community or it's a WASP community outside of Boston, you know, that those battles happen. The divorcing parents, they fight, and they often use kids as a pawn. So it's the kids that we worry about, because they're just innocent. They don't have any part of this. They just happen, by the accident of birth, to be placed into this situation that they have no control over and they have no concept of.
The education about polygamy, if one read the statistics that came down through the Canadian court case, they would know that there is no such thing as good polygamy because of the cause and effect on everyone involved. Yet that is not what is presented to us on allegedly educational films like Sister Wives. Will you address that?
Well, the problem that occurs, Rebecca, is that there is a greater depth and context to the whole subject of polygamy. You know, it's not just simply one man with multiple wives and consenting adults living a different kind of lifestyle. What we have here is coercion from cradle to grave of young women who are forced to believe that this is the only path to their eternal salvation, and that if they do not accept it, that they will be literally destroyed, physically and spiritually. They'll be destroyed, okay? So, you know, some people bring up the Sarah's Law business and of a wife being able to somehow reject the idea of polygamy within the fundamentalist cult. I don't know of any instances where that's worked. You were certainly closer than I was. Do you know any instances where it really worked, where where the first wife said, "No, I'm not going to have this"?
No, what happens is the first wife has to comply,
Oh,
because if she doesn't, she'll be damned for time and all eternity. And in my case, I was the first wife, threatened with blood atonement for the saving of my evil soul. So you have a choice. The choice is do as I say or suffer the consequences. My choice was like holding a gun to my head and saying, now do you obey or do I pull the trigger? Your choice.
yeah, and so see, that's the greater context of all this. There is no consenting adult situation here. They are forced from the time they can listen and reason and learn to believe that this is the way it is, and it's the way to salvation. What happens is that we don't understand that there is no choice in the matter. There is no selection. This is not a lifestyle thing. This is coercion. It's religious coercion, and in effect, a religious persecution, if you will, because if they don't follow it, they are persecuted. The men are either tossed out or they lose their families. The women are sent off somewhere to repent, as Charlene Jeffs. There were several occasions where her husband Lyle sent her away to repent. One time she was gone for 2 years. Another time she was placed in a trailer for a little more than a year that was outside of town, where basically she lived alone. They would bring her boxes of food to sustain her, but she was separated from her family. She said that in her documents, she said that she had pretty much been separated from her kids for the better part of 5 years, off and on, being sent to repent here, being sent to repent there, and not allowed during that time to act as a mother with her children. She did not get to nurture them, or even when she was back within the house, she was not allowed to interact with them as a mother would. So, it's pretty harsh. That's why when you discuss this with people and they go, well, whatever consenting adults want to do is fine with me. Well, if that was the basis for it, it'd be a completely different issue. But we're not talking about consenting adults, and we're talking about an impact on kids' lives.
Ed, you're absolutely correct. In my own personal experience, I went to my mother to beg her to help me escape. She was so afraid of what they might do to me that she herself turned me in. The consequences were I had a little baby, just a few weeks old, that was nursing, my first child. My husband took my baby away from me, physically shoving me away, taking the baby, and gave my baby to a mentally ill woman. And I didn't know if the baby would survive. I didn't know what would happen. And this went on for weeks. It's the worst thing that ever happened to me in my life. Did I come back on my knees for my child? Yes. Did I say he could have all the women he wanted and I wouldn't give him any problem? Yes. The consequences are severe. When my child came back with all of her fingers and all of her toes and looking like she was okay, I fell on my knees and wept. That's all I wanted.
Well, and that's really powerful. I mean, it's overwhelming to think that somebody could take that and warp it and manipulate so severely that way. I mean, but that's what is happening out there, and that's the bit of understanding. That's the bit of, if you will, revelation that needs to occur, because there's no understanding. There's no comprehension of that. Hopefully, people will watch something like this and they'll grasp it. They'll get it, maybe, because there's no comprehension of the horrors and the evil that take place out there. We try to do our best to educate. We're not in the business here of entertaining. We're not going to be cracking jokes and putting smiles on people's faces, because it's too serious. These are real lives. These are real kids. These are real people. And I just really hope that there can be some kind of understanding and perhaps light a fire under it. You know, when this case happened, when the custody lawsuit occurred, all of this evidence was presented in front of this judge. And the judge refused to put temporary custody of these children with their mother, and also refused to put them into protective custody because he said, well, I don't see any danger. Well, there are accusations of illegal activity, fraud, rape going on, child sexual abuse going on, and a judge doesn't see that there is a history of this sort of behavior going on in the community, and he still thinks it's okay to leave these kids out there. I'm sorry, that guy needs to be tossed down on his rear end.
That's pretty bad, but that's the way a lot of them present it. They figure if you don't come into court with enough evidence to throw somebody behind bars, you have no evidence at all, which is not true. But that's their attitude. You know, they come in and say all of these things have happened, protect these children. Well, it isn't proven, so we won't, is the attitude.
But the problem is that it has been proven.
It has, over and over and over. But they say it's not proven with this case, with this man, so therefore.
But we know the history. We know what Warren Jeffs, who is Wild Jeff's brother.
Right.
We know what happened. We know what happened in Texas. We know what happened in Utah.
Yes,
okay,
we
do. We know what happened there. We know about the 11 other men that were arrested with him in Texas from the compound for child sexual abuse and other crimes. We know what happened there. We know Rodney Holmes, the cop that was in Short Creek, that lost his job for marrying an underage child. What more does it take? I mean, come on, give me a break. You know, what more does it take? How much more evidence does it take for them to understand that this is not a series of isolated incidents? It's a part of the lifestyle. It's a part of the community. It's a part of the culture. It's part of the accepted so-called religion that goes on out there. How many more instances will it take before somebody goes, you know what? There's a chance this could happen to this kid. I'm going to roll the dice and hope that it doesn't. Sorry, we're talking about kids here, okay, that are going to be damaged forever, that are going to be hurt, that are going to be shattered. They're going to have horrendous things to deal with. I'm sorry. There's just no acceptance level of this judge and what he didn't do.
You're absolutely correct, Ed. When you talk about consenting adult decisions, I wasn't an adult when I got married. As you're aware, I was married as a child bride, and Warren Jeff's father, Reuben Jeffs, performed my marriage when I was a child bride, and I was a child raised in the AUB. What does that tell you?
Well, it tells me that, you know, we hear about people who claim that the various sects do not get along or mingle or associate with each other. And, you know, we know that the AUB and the FLDS and all of these other groups, we know that that's not true. They do communicate, they do exchange kids, they do have relationships. It's pushed to the side for some reason. It's not understood, comprehended, it's not brought into account. And that's kind of what our job is, you and I and Kristen and the other folks that are involved in not only educational but some kind of activism level. So if we could just educate the public and let them know that these are children that are being physically, emotionally, and spiritually abused, then we succeed. But we're not able to reach them, and I don't know how to get into their heads and hearts with this information, because it's true, it's what's happening, and they're just refusing to believe it.
Child sex slavery is the biggest, fastest growing crime in the world. And this is a case where it's done in the name of religion, where children are bred like cattle for welfare checks and never even have a right to the welfare checks, where kingpins in the name of religion that control them and change and exchange child brides are literally becoming stinkingly wealthy. Address that, Ed.
Well, you know, Rebecca, it's part of the the culture down there, and there's a hierarchy. It's a very patriarchal culture, as you well know. It also is very hierarchical, if you will, where there are a few people that have the control, that have money, that live very well. You know, it's like the 15 men that were named to be the seed bearers for the new generation of FLDS kids, that they had their choice of any fertile female in the community to breed with, if you will. It's this exclusive, perverted little club that Warren and his father and his brother and Willie and the rest of them out there have created, that continues to feed the perversions and money and lifestyle that takes place with more perversion and greed, and it's incredibly sad. And I you know, Warren's in jail, Lyle should be in jail, Willie should be in jail, that whole bunch, and this is not a matter of religious persecution or religious bigotry, if you will. It's a matter of right and wrong, and they're abusing the rights of a religion, a religious organization. They are abusing the souls of people who are innocent and trying to do good, and who truly believe that living well and sacrifice is going to bless them in whatever way. So, you know, you have the ignorant and the innocent, and the ignorant don't want to hear about it, and the innocent don't understand.
And the innocent don't get an opportunity either to really be heard.
None.
I don't understand how any thinking person can imagine that any extreme dual standard is equality and justice and right, and to be able to have all the sexuality you want in the name of God, while a woman can be condemned for time and all eternity for even wanting a healthy amount of affection, is absolutely ridiculous.
But you know that well, Rebecca, because you lived in that environment and in that kind of community. You know how restrictive it is, and you know that there's no humanity attached to it. There's no affection attached to it. It's lust and perversion. It's greed, you know, and it angers the rest of us, because we see what takes place, and as you said, it's part of this ludicrous illusion of religion, and you know, you've got people in charge who don't care except for their own.
Ed, I want to thank you for helping to educate the public. You're marvelous. I'm your fan. Thank you so much for being with us today.
It's always a pleasure, Rebecca, and I'm your fan as well.